The boys in our class cooked up a vote for the ugliest girl, and I took first place. Among the signatures that chose me, Brian Anderson's name stood out in stark relief. I had been secretly in love with him for 6 years and treated him like the sun. With every measured stroke of his pen, he mocked the girl foolish enough to have confessed to him. Years later, a business anchor asked Brian on air whether he had any regrets in life. Brian looked into the camera and said, "In high school I mistook a pearl for a pebble, and someone else took her away. I've regretted it day and night for 7 years. Luckily she's single now, I might still have a chance." That someone else he meant was dining with me at that very moment. Hearing those words, he set down his knife and fork like a gentleman, slid the slices of wagyu toward me, and excused himself to make a call. Out on the Seaview balcony, his voice turned cold. "Sunshine's at Series C, right? Tell Deep Sea, Iris Tech, and Skyship to pull out. All of them." Back in high school, the ugly vote notebook reached my desk and the room went silent. Page 1 was for class beauty, page 2, for class ugly. The former was a crowded field. The latter, a foregone conclusion. Line after line, my name. Of the 21 boys in class, 17 voted for me. I knew I wasn't pretty, single eyelids, thick lips, skin on the dark side, a dated haircut, and pimples across my forehead. I had enough self-awareness not to expect love, least of all Brian's. But when I saw his handwriting, my heart still sank beyond my control. I'd known him 6 years and liked him for just as long. I never imagined that, the very day after I confessed, he would dismiss me so openly. The confession had been an accident. I was minding my family's fruit stall at the corner when Brian passed by. I stopped him and handed over a bag of fruit, saying his mother had bought it. Under the streetlight, his long lashes lowered. "Kathy Garcia, I don't need your pity." He let go, I didn't catch it. Apples and pears rolled everywhere, like his pride in that moment, paper thin, torn at a touch. It slipped out of me. "Brian, it's not pity. I like you. That's why I want to be good to you." I tried to make it breezy. "Plenty of girls stuff milk, cookies, and chocolate into your desk. One more won't make a difference, right?" After 3 seconds, or maybe 30, I couldn't tell, he finally spoke. "Sorry. I don't like you." Clean refusal. Careless exit. It was what I'd expected. Nothing to cry over. I laughed at myself, picked up the apples one by one, brushed off the dirt, and went back to hawking fruit. We lived in the last strip of old low houses in the provincial capital, shabby, cramped, loud. People were too busy scrambling to survive to care about appearances. Poverty and fatigue were written on every face. Brian was different. His family had been hit by disaster, their villa mortgaged, and they'd moved in temporarily. Before that, no one at school knew my mother worked as a housekeeper for his family. He had protected my pride. When I confessed, I was trying to protect his. Otherwise, I never would have said it aloud. But after I confessed, something in him changed, from indifference to aversion. During evening self-study, his handwriting on that page stabbed at my eyes. The strokes were knife-sharp, the script fit the boy. I turned to look at him. He looked back, cool as glass, no emotion in his gaze. Once a blazing sun, he was now nothing more than the light in a refrigerator. Every boy in the room held his breath, waiting to see if I'd crack. "Ugly and thin-skinned? Then you're done." The ballpoint spun in my fingers and tapped against the page. I drew a breath, swept my pen across the paper, wrote down my own name, and held the notebook up. "I vote for me, too. If you don't want others to mock you, mock yourself first." That night the boys bowed their heads even lower. After class, several came to apologize, saying it was just a joke, and that without the pimples I wasn't so bad looking. I smiled and told them it was fine, because what they thought of me didn't matter. As for Brian, I didn't want it to matter either. That night I stopped him at the alley mouth and said everything I'd been holding in. "Brian, I once borrowed Jane Eyre from your study. There's a line I want to give back to you now. Do you think, because I am poor, obscure, plain and little, I am soulless and heartless? Evidently, in your eyes, the ugly have no heart and no right to feel hurt. The joke is, you're not bad people. You cry at feel-good stories online and rage at evil in the news, yet you can humiliate a classmate without even knowing it. You think a little evening game is fun and never stop to wonder whom it might wound. I used to think you were different. Turns out you're no different from the rest. So, Brian, I take back my confession." Once he had been as white as mountain snow, as bright as the moon among clouds. Now he was merely ordinary. Whether I was beautiful or ugly, a boy like that wasn't worth my liking. For a moment something unfamiliar flickered in his usually indifferent eyes. I no longer cared to find out what. Not long after, I switched seats, to the desk beside the most incorrigible student in the entire school, Richard Gatlin. He was the only boy who hadn't voted. He was also the one Brian deliberately avoided. Brian's POV. When Brian wrote Kathy Garcia in that mean-spirited, humiliating notebook, what flashed through his mind was the way Kathy smiled at Richard Gatlin. He'd never thought she was ugly. He'd seen her without the breakouts, no great beauty yet, but certainly not ugly. His mother once said Kathy had a striking, aggressive bone structure beauty. When she grew into it and learned how to put herself together, she might be international runway material. At Brian's age, though, such taste was hard to acquire. Kathy had top grades, a stringy toughness, and a wisdom beyond her years. When others teased her, she could dissolve it in 2 or 3 lines. Once, when Richard treated the class to milk tea, a boy joked, "Kathy, with all those zits, maybe skip the sugar?" She shot back, "Just say you want a second cup. Do my classroom duty for me and you can have mine." He admired her, but that fell short of romantic liking. So when she confessed, he refused. Back home, seeing all the things her family had bought for his house and the kettle of hot water she'd left by the door, he felt guilty and worried she might be too hurt. He went back out to find her, and saw Richard at her fruit stall. To most of the class, Richard was just a willful headache for the teachers, some rich kid with too much pocket money. Only Brian knew what Gatlin meant, the Gatlin family his father had twisted himself into knots to meet but could never approach, and the same Gatlin family that had watched the Andersons drown without lending a hand. Richard's flashy motorcycle idled at the curb. He pulled a book from his bag and tossed it to Kathy. She hugged it like a treasure and, eyes smiling, handed him an apple. The gilded young master actually took it, no rinse, just a wipe on his shirt, and bit deep. It was the apple Brian had just rejected. Lying on his rickety wooden bed in the dark, Brian stared at the window across the alley and asked himself again, is Kathy ugly? He thought, at least when she smiles at Richard, she is. She'd used to smile at him like that, open and unguarded. But once the Anderson family fell, she turned and smiled that way at someone else. Back to me, within 2 days of moving beside Richard, I regretted it. He was too strange. When I sat down clutching my backpack, he was napping on his arms. He blinked up at me, voice lazy. Not chasing Brian anymore. I never chased him, I said. He snorted. He was the only one who knew I had a crush on Brian. He'd found my sketchbook. He didn't seem to like Brian. When he handed the sketchbook back he muttered, "Guys got terrible taste." A few days later was Valentine's Day. The popular kids got mountains of chocolate. Brian's desk was stuffed. Richard barreled into the room, yanked out a box of pricey imported chocolates, and said no one at home ate them, so I might as well take them off his hands. I pushed them back, saying I was cutting sugar. At that, he kicked his chair back, marched over, dumped the chocolates in the trash, and ditched class. Brian walked over and, out of nowhere, set a box on my desk. "These are sugar-free," he said. The room erupted with whistles. Tim slid me a note, "Holy, silent type goes nuclear. One's the class prince, the other's the class tyrant. How'd you pull that off?" I was not so delusional as to think either Richard or Brian liked me. They weren't from my world. Besides, I was the class ugly, remember? Brian's gesture had a cause. His mother had noticed something off between us. I once overheard her tell him, "Kathy's a good girl. Even if you don't like her, you should handle it gently." As for Richard, who knew? He had no pattern. His antics even started to dent my grades. In class he'd twirl a strand of my hair, on scrap paper he'd doodle my name into graffiti, after school he'd race his motorcycle alongside my bus. When he was in a good mood he'd toss me a stack of original edition books, share music, or bring me little gadgets I'd never seen. In a bad mood he'd block the aisle so I couldn't leave or trap me in the equipment room for an entire PE period. I asked him straight out, "Richard, with all these childish tricks, don't tell me you like me." He burst out laughing, face flushed. "Like? What a childish word. I'm bored, that's all. You look so easy to tease, it's funny." Even so, I didn't dislike him. The night of the vote, he snatched the notebook, read it, tore it to confetti, and lit into every boy in the room. "You lot have no taste and dare judge someone else? Is this something a decent human would do? Sharing a class with you is a disgrace. And for the record, she is not ugly. You are." That night he was a hero to me, the kind I'd never expected to appear. At school, Richard was a law unto himself, skipping whenever he pleased, untouchable and unbothered, and, infuriatingly, still near the top of the class. My first impression outside campus was, he loved to play. The first time I ran into him off campus, he and his friends were at a music festival spraying water guns and soaked me as I walked by. He threw me a helmet, swung me onto his bike, and shot off around the ring road. "Dries faster this way," he said. Later, for a social survey assignment I was grouped with him, and every time we video called for our meetings he was in a different place, sometimes in China, sometimes abroad. Because of that first impression, I assumed whenever he wasn't at school he was out having fun. So when I saw him on the sports channel, I was so shocked I forgot to eat. On TV he held an air rifle steady in both hands, focused and composed, like a different person. I held my breath as he sighted the bullseye and squeezed the trigger, when Brian, who was eating at my place, suddenly stood and said to my mom, "Aunt Mary, my dad's being discharged tonight, and some things at home aren't set up yet, could we ask Kathy to help me?" Brian lied, there was nothing that needed my help. The moment I stepped inside, he shut the door and cornered me in his room. "Kathy, you see Richard shining like a star, so now you like him, is that it? Do you realize how ugly the rumors are about that PE period when you two locked yourselves in the equipment room, just the two of you? Do you and he even belong to the same world? Do you know his family background and still dare to cling to him? He doesn't even need to take the college entrance exam, he'll go abroad after graduation. When your fling is over, he'll still be a gilded young master. And you? Have you thought about how filthy your reputation will be?" My phone lit up right on cue, a voice message from Richard. "Little deskmate, did you catch my dashing form? Handsome or not, I'm at your building entrance. Come out, I'll treat you to skewers." Old buildings have awful soundproofing and his voice is loud, we heard every word clearly from the room. Before I could react, I heard my mother say, "You're Kathy's classmate, right? She's next door helping Brian." After a brief silence, I heard Richard say coolly, "Is she? Then I'll head out first." The alley fell quiet again, but another text popped up. "1 in a billion, come out. I'm at the alley mouth." Brian moved closer, so close I had to press back against the wall. Lowering his head, he murmured in my ear, almost pleading, "Kathy, don't go, okay?" When I reached the alley, Richard was leaning on his motorcycle, helmet in his arms. Seeing me, he said coldly, "Get on." That day he rode very fast. We tore through dozens of kilometers to the seaside before he stopped. The moment we halted, he dragged me toward the beach. His grip hurt, I tried several times to shake him off and failed. "Richard, what are you doing?" He only stopped when we reached the waterline, then turned to look down at me from above. "He kissed you just now, didn't he?" A tremor went through me. "Don't talk nonsense." Brian had indeed been very close, but kiss me? Impossible. Richard lifted his hand and brushed the corner of my mouth. "Your silhouettes in the window, I saw them." I turned my head, avoiding his fingers. "Richard, why are you always so unreasonable? Last time too, first aid training in PE. I was paired with Brian, and you locked me in the equipment room. Anytime I say one more sentence to Brian, you lose your temper." I asked him the same question again, "Do you like me?" The calloused pad of his thumb skimmed lightly across my lips. "Kiss me, and I'll tell you." In the moonlight his brows were like stars and his eyes like deep water. Maybe the moonlight was too lovely, maybe the sea breeze too gentle, maybe his voice too persuasive, maybe something else, but a string inside me quivered. I caught a fistful of his shirt, rose on tiptoe, and awkwardly leaned into his slightly parted lips. The instant I touched him, his arms went taut, one hand cinched my waist and drew me in, the other cradled my head as he kissed me like a madman, biting and tasting my lips and tongue. I don't know how long it lasted before he finally let me go. We went back very late that night, our hair and clothes all scented of the sea. When Richard walked me to the alley, Brian was under the streetlight. Brian's father had been discharged. By the taxi, Brian and his mother were lifting him into a wheelchair. Brian looked at us once, his expression a little shattered. Following Brian's gaze, his father saw Richard and grew agitated, tumbling from the wheelchair to the ground. He crawled and knelt before him, clutching at his shoe, voice hoarse. "Young master of the Gatlin family, please. I beg you. Please ask the Gatlin family to help the Anderson family group." Brian dragged at his father desperately. "Dad, don't beg him. It's useless." Richard coolly slipped his shoe free, said to me, "Sleep early. See you tomorrow," then swung onto his bike and roared away. Late that night I sat before the mirror and looked at myself. Single eyelids, thick lips, skin still on the dark side, the acne had eased a lot. But I still couldn't honestly call myself pretty. I thought of that music festival, those boys and girls around Richard were all good-looking and chic, every girl was prettier than me. I'd been wearing a volunteer white tee, the water gun soaked me and my shirt went see-through. Richard tossed me his jacket to wrap up, then offered to take me for a drying ride, and in those girls' eyes I saw jealousy, mockery, and disdain. One girl said, "Richard, give her my jacket, I don't think we need to make such a fuss." A boy joked, "So young Master Richard's tender heart is going exotic now, huh?" By the world's standards I was nowhere near a match for Richard, in looks, family, or personal achievement. Watching Brian's father humble himself on his knees and Richard not even bother with a polite word, I finally woke up to how far apart our worlds were, far beyond what I'd imagined. I recalled Brian's words, "When it's over, he'll still be a young lord." And you? Richard and I were not from the same world. He was born in Rome and could live as he pleased. But me, I had no road but the single-log bridge of the college exam, fighting through a million others. So when Richard came to take me out again the next day, I refused. I said, "The exam's coming. I don't have time to play." He paused, then said, "Then we'll study." Me? He took me to his home. At the foot of the hill there was a guard post. From the gate to the mid-slope villa you passed a lake, a wood, and acres of lawn. Once, hiking with Brian and his father, we'd been shown this place. He'd said, "People who live there can change your fate with a word." Now here I was, looking shabby from head to toe, standing right there. Richard took my hand and, without discussion, pulled me into his world. To the middle-aged man who came to meet us he said, "Uncle Davis, have Teacher Paul come over, my girlfriend needs a boost in physics, it's her 1 week subject." That day I sat through physics in a fog of shock, confusion, and nerves. The whole time he propped his chin and watched me, amused. Every so often he poured me water or brought a plate of fruit. At the end he caged me in the chair, breath warm against my ear. "Studied enough today? If so, let's do something else." Blushing, I shoved him away. "Your parents will be home soon, right? I should go." He nipped my earlobe. "They're abroad." I sprang up. "Then I definitely have to go." He didn't get mad, he just pecked the corner of my mouth, called me a little heartless thing, grabbed his helmet, and drove me back to Lincoln St. After he left, I stood at the ruined alley mouth and looked toward his hill, for the first time truly feeling the vast gap we lived across. That gap didn't bother Richard, I, however, couldn't help minding. Why did he like me? Was it novelty? And how long would novelty last? I didn't know. I only kept telling myself, live in the present, don't worry early about things that haven't happened. I didn't expect that day to come so soon. It started when Brian's father came to see me. He sat uneasily in his wheelchair, circled around for a long time, and finally said what he'd come to say. "I heard our Kathy is seeing the Gatlin young master." "Young Master Richard likes our Kathy very much, anything she asks, he does." My father's face clouded. "That's not true. I haven't heard anything like that." My mother kept winding her yarn and said nothing. I clarified, "Uncle Anderson, Richard and I are deskmates, nothing more." Brian's father suddenly clutched my sleeve and said with difficulty, "Kathy, your Uncle Anderson hasn't treated you badly, has he? Help your uncle, please?" With just one word from the Gatlin family, the Anderson family group could still be saved. "Help me say a few words to the young master of the Gatlin family, will you?" I looked at him, troubled. "Uncle Anderson, we're only students. What you're asking is huge, even if Richard speaks, it doesn't count. You still need the decision-maker of the Gatlin family." Brian's father said firmly, "He's their only heir, he's been groomed as successor for years. They treasure that son. If he could drop a word or two at dinner, maybe our whole group could be saved. Kathy, it isn't just me, this concerns Brian's mother, concerns Brian, concerns thousands of people up and down the Anderson family group." I tossed and turned that night. My mother had worked as a housekeeper for the Andersons for 6 years, and I'd read in their study for the same 6. Brian's parents had always been good to me, they'd broadened my horizons. A person should be grateful, shouldn't she? When Richard came on the weekend to take me to his place to study, I wrestled with myself for 2 days and finally spoke up before we left. He was pouring water for me as I talked. By the time I finished, the glass had overflowed. The water ran across the table and dripped to the floor. With his back to me, his voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "The first favor you ask me is for Brian. Do you even understand what the Anderson family group did to face a crackdown, and you're pleading for them? It's economic crime, do you get that? The people involved are under investigation, results aren't in. And you want the Gatlins to intervene now? You really can't forget Brian? If that's the case, then please don't come bothering me again." He was furious that day, and then I didn't see him at school for 2 straight weeks. By then he'd become the school storm center, everyone knew he'd won the Olympic qualifying event. The girls all gushed about how handsome he looked while shooting, and many people chased me asking how I'd managed to win him over. Right after the win he'd rumble up on his motorcycle to take me to and from school, not hiding from anyone at all. If someone asked what we were, he answered boldly, "Girlfriend. Can't you tell?" Now I stared at the empty seat on my right, and an empty space opened in my chest. Later I sent him a text to apologize and explain, he didn't reply. I next saw him at the 100-day oath rally for the college exam. He crossed the huge field with a girl at his side, so pretty she seemed to glow. I was on stage giving the student address. The moment he appeared the crowd erupted, craning necks to stare. Seeing a different girl beside him, they threw nosy looks up at me. He and the girl stopped below the stage, looking at me as if I were a stranger. I swallowed tears and led all the students in the pledge. I was born a mountain, not a stream. I will stand upon the peaks and look down on mediocre gullies. The students shouted with passion, he alone said nothing. That day he stopped me at the gate to tell me he'd be going to Stanford. I said, "Congratulations. You're still aiming for QU?" He gave a self-mocking smile, put on his helmet, and left with a roar. That was the last time I saw him before the exam. Next I saw him on television. At 18, Richard stood on the Olympic podium with gold, the flag rose for him and the anthem played for him. He was the one standing upon the peaks, looking down at mediocre gullies. I quietly put away the trinkets he'd given me and deleted his contact. Wake from the dream, go our separate ways. Brian and I both attended QU. After we started college, he suddenly began to pursue me. By then my acne was gone, my face and figure were slimmer than before, with makeup, a new hairstyle, and some thought to clothes, I began to turn heads on the street. I took care with my appearance, not to please others, but to please myself, to be more confident and content. My roommate said I wasn't the traditional pale wave type of beauty, but distinctive, feral, and flavorful. When I told them I'd once been voted class ugly, they were incredulous. "No way, you're the kind photographers chase for street shots. Your class must have had subterranean taste, what kind of aesthetics was that?" I laughed. "If you don't believe me, ask Finance's campus prince, Brian, he voted for me too." They all exploded. "No way. He didn't, did he? And now he chases you this loudly, split personality much?" I only smiled and let it pass. In the end the Andersons pulled through, only senior executives involved were arrested, Brian's father was fine, and the Anderson family group resumed operations. But Brian refused to move back to the villa and kept living on Lincoln St. When home on break he often crashed our dinners. He tried every way to be good to me and my family, he must have apologized hundreds of times. "I was blinded by jealousy when I did those rotten things," he said. "Every day you were with Richard, I felt cut to the bone. I couldn't sleep for nights on end, every time you smiled at him, I thought I would die. Give me another chance, please?" I accepted his apology, but not his confession. Some things, once missed, are missed, some feelings, once gone, are gone. He kept at it, though, outside his studies and startup, all his time and energy went into me and my family. He said he believed water wears down stone and an iron rod can be ground into a needle, he believed in filling the sea and moving mountains. "Don't just move yourself," I told him. In my junior year, 2 big turns came. Lincoln St. was slated for demolition, lifting my parents' worries, and I signed with an international modeling agency and earned my first big check. After walking shows big and small at home and abroad, more and more people chased me, but I had zero desire to date. My roommates teased, "Could it be you met someone too dazzling too young, and now no one else can move you?" Richard's smile rose in my mind. I hadn't seen him in a long time, but I kept up with his feed. One roommate was a die-hard fan and would drop his Instagram posts in our group. He still loved playing hard, his socials were full of extreme sports around the world, climbing, surfing, alpine skiing, free diving, wingsuit flying, you name it. Once, during wingsitting, a crosswind nearly caused an accident, and still he went back to those extremes like he had no fear of death. No women ever appeared in his posts. My roommate said that was one reason his female fans adored him. The closest I came to him was when QU invited him for a conversation event. I stood at the auditorium doors clutching my ticket and never went in. I actually saw him again in my 3rd year after graduation. By then I'd started my own art and exhibition studio and kept modeling part-time. Once, in Milan for Prada's new season show, I saw Richard's latest Insta pin him in Milan too, and my heartbeat quickened for no reason. I longed to run into him, and feared it too. The spotlights rose and I stepped onto the runway. After years, I saw him again. In the audience his black shirt was open at the throat, sleeves casually pushed up, his every move held a patrician ease, so different from high school. When I noticed him, he was tilted toward the girl beside him, talking. I'd seen that girl 7 years ago, she still glowed. He slipped off his jacket for her and twisted open her water bottle. She smiled up at him, eyes curved like a soft moon. A match made in heaven. And I had once naively hoped that no women on his feed meant no girlfriend. 7 years on, I thought I'd weaned myself off. But the instant I saw him tending another girl with such gentleness, tears slid down for no reason. Crying on the runway is a major incident. Who knew that tearful glance over my shoulder would blow up the internet? Everyone asked what heartbreak this China beauty had survived. Some bloggers even slowed the footage to analyze my expression. What's the theme of this show? Metamorphosis. Look, when Kathy first steps out, her aura and confidence are lethal. By mid-run her smile suddenly turns shy, softens a lot, then as she reaches the front mark there's a trace of self-mockery. Finally, the god-tier look back, eyes shattered, one perfect tear at just the right moment, yet the curve of her lips is release. This vividly shows how a heart moves from freedom, to thunderstruck, to shattered, to healed, and finally to reborn. It perfectly embodies the theme metamorphosis. What do you call this? You call it professionalism. The top comments piled up to over 10,000. Fun fact, modeling is just this lady's side gig, her own art and exhibition company is an industry upstart. Also, she did her undergrad at QU and an MBA at AU. A straight-A student on the runway really is different. She told an entire story with her eyes in 30 seconds. Her features are so distinctive, at first glance she may not seem conventionally beautiful, but you just can't help looking again and again, look again and again, welp, I'm falling for her. Riding the accidental wave of heat, I was invited into the main ballroom at the celebration for my International Fashion Week debut. There, I saw Richard again. I carried a glass of wine and a polished smile, weaving among the world's tycoons and luminaries. To be praised, noticed, flattered, stared at, none of it mattered, I had my own aims. From the moment I entered, Richard's gaze stayed on me. I pretended not to see, deftly navigating among men of every sort. I laughed as I pleased and let those who wielded money and power make me their quarry. I knew what I was doing, and in a room like this I knew how to get what I wanted without paying too much. One drink after another, one dance partner after the next. On the 7th dance, Richard's arm slid around my waist. His familiar voice, edged with anger, sounded at my ear, "Kathy, you're doing this on purpose, aren't you?" On purpose to draw his attention, on purpose to needle him. I rested my hand lightly on his shoulder, eyes hazy. Sure, I'm doing it on purpose. In this den of glitter, some are fish, some are bait, some are fishermen. Who isn't here with an agenda? His grip on my waist tightened, pulling me closer. Years apart and you've learned not to speak like a human. And you, young Master Richard, have learned to slap labels around. His eyes hunted mine like an eagle's, and his hand grew more possessive. Where's Brian? Why didn't he escort you to Milan? I shot back, and your companion? Not here tonight? So you did see me at the show. I'd lost the exchange, I stopped talking and simply turned with his lead. When the piece ended, he drew me onto an empty terrace. The wind was cool, he shrugged off his jacket and laid it over my shoulders, and I didn't refuse. After a few glasses of wine he finally spoke. That tear, who was it for? What do you think? He looked out into the distance, speaking slowly. For a moment, I thought it was for me. I was about to answer when his companion came after us, eyes questioning. Richard, and this lady is? Richard hesitated, then introduced us. Kathy, my high school classmate, and my ex-girlfriend, Maria, my childhood friend, and my fiancée. A gust of night wind blew through, it was bone cold. Maria greeted me with easy grace. So you're Miss Garcia. A pleasure, long admired. Richard misspoke, not a fiancé yet, we get engaged at month's end. Her glance flicked to the jacket on me, I hurried to take it off, but somehow it snagged and wouldn't come free. Heat rushed to my face, I fumbled, mortified. I thought I'd never meet a scene more embarrassing than this in my life. Maria gently squeezed my hand to stop my flailing. It's all right, Miss Garcia, keep it on. I nodded woodenly. Thank you. I have things to attend to, I'll be going. The song says, with nothing sought in the heart, wind or no wind, you're free. What's fated not to be, besides letting go, what else is there? I returned to the banquet, met who needed meeting, secured what needed securing. That night I collected a raft of private contacts from marquee names, plus several collaboration invites from international luxury brands. Back at the hotel, tipsy and blurred, I automatically fished for my phone. The screen lit with a photo of me. I keyed the passcode to unlock, meaning to call my assistant, only to find her number wasn't saved. Puzzled, I got a call. My phone's with you, can you return it? I was drunk enough to protest, how could your phone be with me? Nonsense. The one in your hand is mine. Where are you? I'll come get it. I patted the bedding under me and muttered, in bed. He was silent a long time, then rasped, where are you, Bulgari? That night, the wine fogged me, but it clarified him. On the flight back to Beijing, the airline told me I'd been upgraded. I've been upgraded before, but having the upgrade mean a different aircraft was a first. An empty shuttle bus delivered me to the plane. Boarding, I realized it was a private jet. I already knew. Sure enough, the jet's lone passenger, Richard, was leafing through financials. What's this supposed to mean? He looked up. On the way, giving you a lift home. I laughed. You're getting engaged at month's end, and now you ditch your fiancé to give me a lift? He said, yes. I turned to get off. I wasn't about to entangle myself in something that would hurt everyone. But the door was already sealed. Sit, buckle up, and then we'll discuss a deal. I blinked, so this was about business. Brian had said the Gatlin family would donate a cache of artifacts to the National Museum, pieces Richard had repatriated over the years from Europe and the Americas, some gathered from private hands, some won at auction, some donated by overseas Chinese entrepreneurs, 361 in all. They'd get a standalone exhibition. He said, "I want your firm to produce it." I tamped down the surge in my chest and agreed at once. He smiled. "You'll agree before we've discussed terms? Even if we lost money, I'd fight to take this. I know the social value outweighs the commercial. When do we sign?" To show sincerity, I opened my laptop on the spot and began drafting a proposal. While drafting, I lobbed a rookie question. "Are the artifacts all on this plane?" "They're not, and they wouldn't fit." "None of the treasures you brought back are here?" I sighed. I was hoping to feast my eyes first. He lifted his gaze from the tablet and held mine. "One is. I have to keep it with me to feel at ease." "What is it?" "You're clever, can't you guess?" "The long-lost Imperial Air Seal of Qin." After landing, he whisked me straight into a Cayenne and onto a villa. Anytime I looked ready to balk he asked, "Do you still want that contract?" In the empty villa a long dining table was already set. We sat across from each other, and Richard slid a contract toward me. "Answer 3 questions truthfully, and not just this exhibition, every exhibition under the Gatland sphere goes to you." Such a windfall? I said at once, "Ask me anything, I'll be 100% honest." He opened a bottle and poured me half a glass. "That tear, who did you shed it for?" I took the glass, met his eyes, and answered plainly. "For you. For myself. For the love between us that never came to fruition." He stared, stunned a moment, then threw back his entire glass. I smiled and matched him. "Next question. Tell me whether you chose him over me, and whether you've regretted it these years." I filled his glass and spoke evenly. "I never chose him." He stared, incredulous. "Kathy, the rule is you tell the truth." "That is the truth. I never chose him, even when I pled for the Andersons back then, it was for his parents. I let him go long ago, but you never believed me." "You haven't been with him at any time these 7 years?" "No." His breath hitched, almost like a gasp, then he laughed, tears welling, and drained his glass again. I matched him once more, then asked, "And the third?" "Eat with me first, we'll do it after, all right?" So we began a long, silent dinner. Course by course he served me, every move precise and elegant. He was nothing like the Richard who once took a bite of the apple one handed him without a second thought. The tightness in my chest grew. I asked if we could turn on the TV in the adjoining room for a little background noise. The screen flickered to the finance channel, and Brian's voice filled the empty space. A host was interviewing him. By now Brian was a rising star in finance, CEO of Sunshine Group. The host asked if he had any regrets in life. Brian looked into the lens. "In high school I mistook a pearl for a pebble, and she was snatched away. For 7 years I've regretted it day and night, but luckily she's single now. I still have a chance." That someone else, he meant, was dining with me. At that, Richard set down his knife and fork like a gentleman, slid the sliced wagyu toward me, and said he needed to make a call. I rose to switch off the TV, a sea breeze drifted in, and I heard him clearly. Out on the ocean view balcony, his voice was cold. "Sunshine's financing is at Series C, right? Have Deep Sea, Iris Tech, and Skyship all pull out?" When he finished the call, he came back to the table. "Kathy, the last question, think before you answer." I nodded solemnly. "Do you want me to cancel the engagement?" Richard's POV. Maria never fully understood why Richard had fallen for Kathy back in high school. She'd gone to the school once, to her eye, Kathy was ordinary. Decent looks and grades, average family. Among ordinary people she might stand out, but matched with Richard, she fell short. Only Richard knew why. He first saw Kathy at an accident scene. A young construction worker in his early 20s had fallen 6 meters from an unfinished building, his thin chest impaled on an exposed rebar. He hadn't died immediately, he balanced on tiptoe, skewered, retching blood and howling for his mother. The scene was so bloody that bystanders panicked, no one knew what to do, and they could only watch as the poor boy bled out. Some sighed in pity, some covered their faces and wept, some couldn't bear to look. As Richard called for an ambulance, a girl with a backpack and plain clothes broke from the crowd. She threw her arms around the blood-soaked worker and lifted, giving him leverage, a place to lean, sparing him the agony of standing on his toes. Softly she said, "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. It's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. The doctors will be here soon, hold on just a little longer." She wanted him to hurt less. She didn't want him to die alone. He died in her arms, calling mother, calling "it hurts," again and again. When he stopped breathing, she was drenched in blood, eyes brimming. She was only a junior then. Rickard thought of the line from The Teacher, "When I still sheathed the northern sea, I saw plum blossoms blazing." He had never seen a soul burn so bright. From that day, the girl named Kathy walked into Richard's heart and never left. He transferred to a public school for her. Soon after he arrived, he learned she liked someone. She had a whole sketchbook filled with drawings of Brian. Brian, what had he ever done to deserve it? He had even humiliated her looks in that vile, juvenile class vote. When she moved her seat beside his, Richard felt the gods had finally heard his prayer. He began trying every way to be good to her. When she asked if he liked her, Richard had never been so tongue-tied in his life. She always thought he was just a guy who played around. He thought he had to show her his excellence. He told her the exact time of the Olympic qualifying broadcast. He even waited under her building, hoping to take her out for skewers and hear her praise him. But she was in Brian's apartment. Two shadows in the window, so close, that jealousy drove him mad. Upbringing restrained the urge to storm upstairs and tear them apart. He counted the seconds at the alley mouth, his heart frying in oil. When he saw her, he couldn't hold back. That night he kissed her, with everything he had. They were together after that, but he felt no safety at all. She yielded to him, yet never showed signs of liking him, nothing like how she'd liked Brian. When she begged him to help the Andersons, something in him snapped. So it had all been for Brian? In his life Richard had never known such defeat. She texted, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, and I'm not doing this for Brian." How could he believe it? He'd seen those tender strokes in her drawings, and every moment she snuck glances at Brian. Back at school she stood on stage to speak, and Brian stood to one side, looking at her with gentleness. He stopped her at the gate and asked if she was aiming for QU. She nodded. So she still wanted to attend the same university as Brian. Richard let go. He poured himself into Olympic training. On the day he won, he still couldn't help sending Kathy a message. "One in a billion, I hear you got into QU, congratulations." She had already deleted him. Why? Just because he wouldn't help the Andersons. Richard did, in the end, go to his father about the Anderson family. If Kathy was truly going to be tied to them for life, then they couldn't be allowed to fall. Fortunately Brian's dad wasn't implicated, it was resolved fairly smoothly. Brian came to thank him, they politely added each other on WeChat. After that, Richard kept seeing Kathy in Brian's moments. Her college life was dazzling, and she was visibly more and more beautiful. He went to see her secretly a few times and didn't dare be seen. When he was invited to QU for a talk, he couldn't help getting a professor to pass her a ticket. She didn't come, the seat stayed empty all night. They say among the 3,000 human ailments, longing alone has no cure. Richard learned that to the bone. The day Brian announced in moments that he and Kathy were together, Richard was about to wingsuit. Friends urged him not to jump. He jumped anyway. In midair he hit unstable wind and, for a moment, wondered, if something happened to him, would she grieve? After that he stopped looking at Brian's moments. Back then he never doubted their authenticity. He didn't know how far a person might go to possess another. He only knew he had never missed someone so much, and never wanted so little to see them. Knowing she would never be his drove him to despair. With nowhere to put his obsession and refusal, he vented it through every extreme sport. Everything changed at the Milan show. Kathy looked at him, eyes bright and sad. When that tear slid down, Richard's understanding inverted. Why would she cry? Could it be for him? Did he live in her heart? He needed an answer. He asked once on the banquet terrace. He asked again along the colonnade at the Bulgari. Drunk, she looped her arms around his neck and said, "There's only one person in this world who can make me cry. He's too far from me. I chased with everything I had. Just when the distance finally shrank a little, he was about to get married." Shock and confusion gave way to elation. The answer was at hand, but it was drink loose and talk. He had to hear her say it, clear and sober. "The three things Richard asked me were really just one thing. Do you love me?" His face held such care and such worry. Everything was plain. I looked into his eyes and asked the one question left to me. "What exactly is with you and Maria?" "Answer me first. I need to know what you are with her before I can answer." "Don't worry about that, just tell me whether you want me to cancel the engagement." He stared stubbornly, demanding an answer. I drew a long breath and said, carefully, "I do. I want you to cancel. I don't want to watch you marry someone else." "But..." He stopped my words with a kiss, hard, hungry, as if he meant to devour everything. It was revenge and claim. What sense I had left made me murmur, "Maria." Between fevered kisses he dialed Maria and hit speaker. Maria's voice burst out, excited. "Cousin. Well? Did it work? If she gets jealous, she's got you in her heart. Tell me my chain plan isn't flawless, what about our deal? Richard, that little idol you like, I'll fund a variety show and have him live with you in the mountains for 2 months. Me?" The moon was soft that night, the sea air damp. His whispers in my ear grew more and more persuasive. "May I?" Moonlight crept inch by inch, waves advanced in pulse after pulse. In ear, in body, in heart. On the wall our shadows tangled with moonbeams, drowning, little by little, in boundless tenderness. I thought of the first time I saw him at school. A winter in junior year, snow like goose feathers. I'd finished my classroom chores and gone out with the trash. He stood in the corridor light with a few books, his face bathed in a warm glow like a painting. He said, "Excuse me, are you in year 2, class 1? I'm a transfer, my name's Richard. Do you need a desk mate?" I thought of the time my period hit and I was curled over my desk in pain. He happened by, pressed a box of painkillers into my hand, and bought milk tea for the class. Only mine was hot. I thought of all the times I glanced back in class and crashed into his eyes darting away. I thought of the first time he ditched everyone to take me riding, that tense back that couldn't hide its joy. But back then I was locked in a box labeled ugly. I never dared believe anyone would like me for no reason. Even when he kept showing me with his actions, I couldn't wholly believe. I hadn't imagined he was just like me. Just like me, restless and unsure in love, with no confidence. How foolish and funny we were. But thank goodness, after all the circling, we didn't miss each other. Later a reporter asked us if we regretted losing 7 whole years. Richard said, without hesitation, "Of course." I nodded, and then shook my head. Regret, and yet no regret. In high school I saw him blazing, and I felt dim. He was already a towering tree, I was only a seed. Without these 7 years of breaking soil and growing toward the sun, I couldn't stand before him as I do now, equal, assured, calm in receiving his love. The reporter went on, it said Sunshine's CEO, Brian, has been loudly declaring his love for Miss Garcia lately, even naming his flagship product after her. Richard looked into the lens. "This airs tonight, yes?" The cameraman nodded. Richard pulled out 2 little red booklets. "Brian, look closely at what these are. Harass my wife again and I'll stop playing nice. Think carefully." I said, "Cut that part." No, air it." "Why cut it? Do you have thoughts?" "Like squabbling school kids, undignified." "I don't care." "You really want him in our marriage announcement edit?" He thought, then shook his head hard. Before the wedding, out on the seaside terrace in the breeze, I asked a question buried deep for years. "Richard, in high school, did you not think I was tacky and ugly?" "Back then, the boys in our class all did." He answered, "The first time I saw you, you were holding that blood-soaked migrant worker. You burned so bright I couldn't look straight at you. After that I watched your profile for a whole year. You'll never know how many times you walked into my dreams." I grew up early and learned how shifting and subjective standards of beauty are, how crude and shallow it is to judge by looks. I also learned that lovely shells will fade with time, but a lovely soul will never lose its color. And most of all, believe me, the person I choose is, without fail, 1 in a billion.